And this is the way it opened up on the stage. He would come shuffling out on the stage, dressed in costume, the guy who wrote this thing and who performed it. And, of course, he used an authentic dialect of the day. He came out with an old straw hat, and he would sit on a box and cross his feet and light up a pipe, and he had this old straw hat on, and he would start to talk to the audience, and the audience loved him. Every place he went, they would wait to hear the opening lines, and the band would play down in the pit. They would play la ta 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 ti la ta ti ti ta ta ta. He had his own theme song, and the crowd would cheer. The curtain would go up, and there he would be sitting right in the middle of the stage with the spotlight on him, and the backdrop had a country scene. You could see a couple of silos, a couple of pigs wallowing in the mud on the backdrop behind him, and he would start to talk. He'd say, you know, you've heard a lot of prating and a prattling about how this is being the age of specialization. You heard about that, no doubt? Well, I'm a carpenter by trade, and at one time I could have built a house, a barn, a church, or a chicken coop. But you know what? I seen the need of a specialist in my line, so I studied her. I got her. She's mine. Gentlemen, you are face to face with the champion privy builder of Sangamon County. Now, it didn't come about accidental. I'm going to tell you how it happened. Luke Harkins was my first customer. He heard about me specializing, and he decided to take a chance. Well, he called me, and I went over to see him, and I built for him just the average 8-family 3-holer. And I want to tell you, with that job alone, my reputation was made. And since then, I have devoted all of my time and all of my thought to that special line. I've studied it. Of course, when business is slack, I do a little bit of paper hanging on the side. But let's face it, my heart is in privy building. And when I finish a job, I ain't through. I give all my customers 6 months privy service free, gratis. Now, I explained this to Luke. And one day, he calls me up and he says, Lem, I wish you'd come out. I'm having privy trouble. So I gets in my car and I drives out to Luke's place. And I hid behind them Baldwins where I could get a good view of the situation. Well, it was right in the middle of haying time. And them hired hands was going in there and staying anywheres from 40 minutes to an hour. Now you think of that, in the privy. Well, I says, Luke, you sure have got privy trouble. So I takes out my kit of tools and I goes in to examine the structure. Well, the first thing I does, I looks at the catalog hanging there, thinking it might be that. But it wasn't even from a recognized house. Then I look at the seats proper, and then I see right away what the trouble was. I had made them holes too darn comfortable. So I takes out my scroll saw, and I cuts them hard, square, with hard edges. Then I goes back and I takes up position as before. Me here, the Baldwins here, and the privy over there. And I watched them hired hands going in and out for nearly 2 hours, and not one of them stayed more than 4 minutes. Luke, I says, I've solved her. That's what comes of being a specialist, gentlemen. Well, 'twarn't long after I built that twin job for the schoolhouse, and then after that, the biggest plant up to date, an 8-holer, a beautiful 8-holer. Elmer Ridgway was down, he looked it over, and he come to me one day and he says, Lem, I seen that 8-hole job you done down there at the corners. It sure is a dandy. And figuring as how I'm going to build on the old Robinson property, I thought I'd like to ask you to kind of estimate a job for me. Well, you come to the right man, Elmer, I says. I'll be out as soon as I get the roof on the 2-seater I'm putting up for the sheriff. Well, a couple of days later, I drives out to Elmer's place, getting there about dinner time. I knocks a couple of times on the door, and I sees they got a lot of folks to dinner, so as not to wishing to disturb 'em, I just sneaks around to the side door, and I yells in the window, Hey, Elmer, here I am. Where do you want that privy put? Well, Elmer comes out, and we get to talking about a good location. He was all for putting her right alongside a jagged path running by a big northern spy tree. Well, I wouldn't do it, Elmer, I says. I wouldn't do it, and I'll tell you why. In the first place, her being near a tree is bad. There ain't no sound in nature so disconcerting as the sound of apples dropping on the roof when you're concentrating. And then another thing, there's a crooked path running by that tree, and the soil there ain't adapted to absorbing moisture. During the rainy season, she's likely to be slippery. Now, you take your grandpappy. Going out there is about the only recreation he gets. It's about the only fun he gets out of life. Well, he's going to come out there some rainy night with his nighties flapping around his legs, and like as not, when you come out in the morning, you'll find him prone in the mud, or maybe skidded off one of them curves and wound up in the corn crib. No, sir, I says, no, sir, you put her in a straight line with the house. And if it's all the same to you, have her go past the wood pile. Now, I'll tell you why. Now, you take a woman, for instance. Out she goes. On the way back, she'll gather 5 sticks of wood, and the average woman will make 4 or 5 trips a day. Now, there's 20 sticks in the wood box without any trouble. You put it past the wood pile, see? Now, on the other hand, you take a timid woman. If she sees any men folks around, she's too bashful to go direct out, so she'll go to the wood pile, pick up the wood, go back to the house, and watch her chance. Now, the average timid woman, especially a new hired girl, I'd known them to make as many as 10 trips to the wood pile before she goes in, regardless. Now, on a good day, you'll have your wood box filled by noon. Now, right there's a saving of time. Now, about the digging of her, you can't be too careful about that. You just can't. I says, you dig her deep, you dig her wide. It's a mighty sight better to have a little privy over a big hole than a big privy over a little hole. Another thing, when you dig her deep, you've got her dug, and you ain't got that disconcerting thought stealing over you that sooner or later you're going to have to dig again. It just stands to reason. And when it comes to construction, now there's where I specialize. I says, I want you to listen to me. Now, when it comes to construction, I can give you joists or beams. Now, you got the choice. Now, joists make a good job. Beams cost a bit more, but they're worth it. They's worth it. Beams, you might say, will last forever. Of course, I could give you joists, but you take your Aunt Emmy. Now, she ain't getting a mite lighter. Someday she might be out there when them joists give away, and there she'd be. Catched. Just like that. Another thing you got to figure on, Elmer, I says, is that Oddfellows picnic that comes around here in the fall. Them boys is going to get in there in 4s and 6s, singing and drinking and the like, and I want to tell you there's nothing breaks up an Oddfellows picnic quicker than a digging party. Beams, I say, every time, beams, and rest secure. And how about a roof, I said? How about a roof? I can give you a lean-to type or a pitch roof. Now, pitch roofs cost a bit more, but some of our best people has lean-tos. If it was for myself, I'd have a lean-to, and I'll tell you why. A lean-to has 2 less corners for the wasps to build their nests in. And on a hot August afternoon, there ain't nothing so disconcerting as a lot of wasps buzzing around while you're sitting there doing a little reading, figuring, or just thinking. And you know another thing I says, a lean-to gives you a high door. Now, you take that son of yours, shooting up like a weed, don't any of him seem to be turning under. Now, if he was trying to get under a pitch roof door, he'd crack his head any time. You take a lean-to, Elmer. They ain't stylish, but they're practical. They're what I'd put up. Now, let's talk about furnishings. Now, I can give you a nail or a hook for a catalog. Besides that, a box for the cobs. Now, you take your pa, for instance. He's of the old stool. Naturally, he'd prefer the box. So put them both in, I say. Elmer, it won't cost you a bit more for the box, and keep peace in the family. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, I says. And as long as we're on furnishings, I'll tell you about a technical point that was put to me the other day. Good question. The question was this. What is the life, or how long will the average mail-order catalog last in just a plain ordinary 8-family 3-holer? Well, it stumped me for a spell. I thought about it. This being a reasonable question, I checked up, and I found that by placing the catalog in there, say in, let's say January, when you get your new one, you should be into the harness section by June. Of course, that ain't through Apple time, not counting on too many city visitors either. And another thing, they've been putting so many of those stiff-colored sheets in the catalog here lately that it makes it kind of hard to figure. You know, something ought to be done about this, and I've thought about taking it up with Mr. Sears Roebuck himself. They're ruining them catalogs for real good use.